A black leviathan glided across the stars, its segmented hull reflecting the pale light of a distant sun. To the human settlers below, it looked as though some ancient god had decided to eclipse the sky. Within its command deck, Grand Marshal Thalek of the Tarshek Dominion surveyed the pale, crater-ridden moon through layered holographic displays. He had fought campaigns against 7 species, broken 3 civilizations, and shattered countless worlds, yet never had an assignment. Felt quite so trivial. Before him sprawled Outpost Kilo 29 less, a fortress, more a mining colony, if he was honest. A scatter of squat metal habitats huddled around a single landing pad, marked with the crude emblem humans, called the Terran Banner. His intelligence reports, compiled from intercepted broadcasts and the testimony of lesser races, painted the same picture over and over. Humans were unrefined, a predatory offshoot of a soft-blooded primate species that had somehow crawled off their polluted cradle world. They had no genetic enhancements, no coherent empire, no psychic harmonics. The only remarkable detail was their inexplicable pattern of survival. In campaign after campaign, the Tarshek had watched small human settlements endure siege after siege, each time forcing their attackers to expend disproportionate resources. Whole Tarshek armadas were recalled from distant conflicts to manage these pest exterminations. It was becoming an embarrassment. Thus, Thalek's assignment had been presented as both a punishment and an opportunity to restore the Dominion's image. He permitted himself a satisfied smile as his adjutant relayed the final targeting data. One swift planetary strike followed by a ground assault to extinguish any survivors, and the spectacle would be complete. The feed from reconnaissance drones showed no visible planetary defenses beyond a few automated cannons, archaic systems, easily neutralized by electronic warfare. Thermal scans revealed perhaps 1,000 life signatures, scattered in predictable clusters around their central command. This would be simpler than crushing an insect nest. "Signal all units," Thalek rasped, his voice low and confident. "Commence operation. Let the galaxy witness what happens to those who defy Tarshek supremacy." The first wave of Tarshek. Drop pods screamed through Vesper's Reach's fragile atmosphere, trailing long plumes of ionized vapor across the sky. They struck the barren rock in disciplined patterns, rings of armored cylinders hammering into the dust and disgorging squads of gleaming exoskeletal soldiers. The Tarshek shock troopers advanced with the predatory confidence of an apex species. Their weapons unfolded from their armored harnesses, humming with the promise of lethal energy. As Grand Marshal Thalek monitored the operation from his command throne, he permitted himself a thin smile. Whatever that human transmission had intended, a final gesture of defiance, some crude attempt at intimidation, it had failed to slow the Dominion's progress by even a moment. On the surface, platoon commanders reported the same litany Thalek had heard countless times: minimal opposition, scattered resistance, outdated weaponry. One Tarshek officer, her crest marked with the silver bars of a sub-commander, stalked across the shattered remains of a mining platform and kicked aside a burned-out drone. No sign of anything resembling an organized defense, she reported, her voice echoing through the tactical channel. "We're advancing to the second perimeter. Casualties, 0. Thalek gave a curt nod. As expected, yet even as the Dominion soldiers pressed deeper into the outpost, small irregularities began to accumulate, little details that didn't quite fit the script of inevitable conquest. The first reports seemed trivial. One squad noted that the humans had rerouted power to concealed conduits beneath the outpost's foundations. Another observed that the mining machinery, which should have been inert, retained low-level operational readiness. Someone even claimed to have glimpsed shapes moving through ventilation shafts, too large for maintenance drones, too agile for unmodified humans. Thalek dismissed these anomalies as battlefield noise. Even primitive species could manage crude sabotage. But then came a more troubling report. A second wave of drop pods found their landing zone saturated with electromagnetic interference. Half their targeting beacons failed to respond, and the pods scattered across kilometers of rocky terrain. He turned toward the comms officer, narrowing his eyes. Is there any indication the humans possess jamming technology of this sophistication? The technician shifted uncomfortably. Negative, Grand Marshal. Our intelligence assessment rated their electronic warfare capabilities as negligible. Then correct your assessment, he growled. More feeds bloomed across the holodisplay. Infantry helmet cams revealed tight corridors blasted open from within. Human defensive positions that should have been static bunkers were eerily empty. One Tarshik squad swept through a cavernous warehouse only to find that every storage container had been methodically emptied. No supplies, no weapons, no evidence of disorder. Command, this is Alpha 7, a squad leader reported, his voice tight. We are not detecting civilians. Not even biosigns in the habitation sectors. Thalik's clawed fingers drummed the armrest of his throne. Define not detecting. Outside the dreadnought, a fleet of support cruisers moved into formation. Swarms of drop pods unfurled from their bellies, glinting like iron seeds. As they fell toward the moon's scarred surface, ion drives flared, correcting their descent trajectories with clinical precision. In moments, they would land, disgorge shock troops, and purge the colony in a wave of fire. Yet as the alien armada prepared to descend, a technician at Thalik's side frowned at a blinking indicator. Grand Marshal, there is a transmission, she said, hesitant. From whom? One of the outpost frequencies, sir. It appears to be a live audio broadcast. Patch it through. A burst of static filled the command deck. Then a voice, steady and calm, emerged, speaking in the rough consonants of Terran Standard. To the Tarshik fleet above, we see you. Thalik lifted a brow ridge, mildly intrigued. The voice was male, without any trace of panic. We know why you're here, the voice continued. We know what you think you'll find. You believe we are unprepared, that our colony is an easy mark. A ripple passed through the officers stationed at their consoles. You think your size and numbers guarantee victory, that no one will remember what you did here, that we will simply be erased, forgotten. Thalik motioned for the transmission to be muted. Typical bravado, he said dismissively. Resume. Wait, his adjutant murmured. There's more. The voice grew quiet, intimate, as though addressing each of them personally. But there is something you have forgotten. Something your archives don't record. We are not the ones who die quietly. Thalik studied the tactical readouts, searching for the source of this defiance. A lone communication tower flickered with power, its signal repeating across the bandwidth. He could crush it with a thought. We are the descendants of every species you conquered, every world you burned. And we learned something you never did. The technician swallowed, her eyes fixed on her console. That in the darkness between the stars, survival is not given, it is earned. It is built from sacrifice and rage, and the refusal to yield. A low murmur spread among the command crew. Thalik felt a curious stirring in his gut, a sensation he could not immediately classify. And when you come to bury us, the voice finished, almost softly, you had better bring more than fear. The transmission ended. For a long moment, the bridge was silent except for the soft chime of system readouts. Pathetic theatrics, Thalik spat, though the words tasted hollow. He turned back to the holographic feed, watching as the first waves of drop pods began their descent through thin clouds. Below, on the surface of that desolate moon, the humans were stirring, gathering in their bunkers, sealing their helmets, arming weapons that should have been obsolete centuries ago. He could see them now, the visual feed magnified, their movements precise, unhurried. The Grand Marshal's gaze lingered on one figure standing alone on a landing platform. A woman in battered armor raised her eyes to the sky, as if she could see him watching. Then she lifted her hand in a gesture Thalek did not recognize, fingers closed in a fist over her chest. The Tarshit general told himself it meant nothing, a symbol without power, a gesture without consequence. But somewhere, in the hidden crevices of his mind, doubt began to take root. Scans show thermal traces, but they're wrong, as if the heat signatures were recorded and rebroadcast. We're also picking up intermittent biometric readings, heart rates, respiration, but they don't correspond to any moving targets. A hush settled across the command deck. Could it be atmospheric distortion? The adjutant suggested, though her tone carried no conviction. Possible, Thalek said, but unlikely. He rose, folding his arms behind his back as he studied the tactical overlays. From high orbit, the outpost still appeared pitiful, a patchwork settlement clinging to the edge of an impact basin. But now he could see something he hadn't noticed before. Beneath the clustered habitats and mining rigs lay a web of subterranean structures. Why were these sublevels not flagged in our reconnaissance? He demanded. Our scans penetrated to a depth of only 30 meters, the comms officer replied. That's consistent with their known engineering capacity. Thalek said nothing. His gaze roamed the flickering icons that marked Tarshik units advancing sector by sector, their progress slowing as they encountered sealed bulkheads, labyrinthine corridors, and strange heat anomalies. On the surface, the Tarshik soldiers pushed deeper. A squad entered a utility tunnel, stepping over lengths of exposed conduit that pulsed with cold blue light. At the end of the passage, a door loomed, reinforced alloy, etched with the Terran banner. The squad leader raised a hand, signaling a breach. As the cutting charges were placed, the helmet cam panned across the walls. Graffiti, scrawled in the blocky alphabet of Terran Standard, stretched from floor to ceiling. We are still here. We will always be here. Remember, Earth. Thalek watched the feed in silence as the charges ignited and the door collapsed inward. A swirling cloud of dust billowed out. The Tarshit troopers advanced into the chamber beyond and halted. Alpha 7. Report, Thalek snapped. The squad leader's helmet cam tilted slowly, capturing the room's contents. Rows upon rows of human exosuits stood waiting, their visors glowing with an eerie crimson light. Weapon racks lined the walls, fully stocked. Sir, the squad leader whispered, his voice ragged. These aren't supply caches. This is an armory. And the suits, they're all powered. The feed flickered and died. For the first time since this campaign had begun, Thalek felt a cold tightness in his chest. All around the outpost, other squads began reporting similar discoveries. Hidden bunkers full of charged weapons, unregistered power sources, sealed vaults that hummed with energy. A dozen Tarshik officers turned to look at him, their eyes searching for reassurance. Thalek straightened slowly, willing his voice to remain steady. This changes nothing, he declared. Secure all entrances to the sublevels. Deploy demolition teams. We will reduce this entire installation to slag if necessary. Yet as he spoke, he could not shake the image of those motionless exosuits, waiting in darkness. And he could not ignore the suspicion, growing stronger by the moment, that the humans had wanted him to find them. Asterisk on the moon's ravaged surface, the Tarshik formations began to fracture, their advance slowing to a crawl. All along the perimeter, troopers paused outside sealed blast doors and tangled tunnels that hadn't appeared on any of their reconnaissance sweeps. The Dominion's battle doctrine was built on overwhelming force and instant subjugation, but now their forces were forced into a siege of empty corridors and hidden chambers. Inside the command dreadnought, Thalek felt a flicker of unease. It was one thing to outmatch a primitive enemy. It was another to feel them maneuvering unseen, as though the humans had anticipated every step. Deploy demolition ordnance, he ordered, his voice hard. We will collapse their tunnels before they can mount any counterattack. Yes, Grand Marshal, the comms officer said, though she swallowed audibly. Outside, squads began placing high-yield charges along structural supports. Heavy infantry advanced behind mobile shields, their scanners raking each chamber for heat. Signatures dotting a control bunker near the landing pad. A woman in battered combat armor watched it all unfold on an array of flickering monitors. Lieutenant Commander Sophia Rourke exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the inside of her visor. She tapped the comm switch on her wrist. Control to all teams. Phase 1 is complete. Confirm readiness for countermeasures. One by one, voices crackled back. Mining rig control, ready. Sublevel engineering, ready. Orbital relays, signal strong. Rourke lifted her gaze to the ceiling, imagining the dreadnought looming there like a bladed moon. For the last year, she and the other survivors had worked day and night, building redundancies, laying traps, weaving false sensor data into the Dominion surveillance. They'd emptied warehouses, rerouted thermal outputs, and stored decoys of every vital sign a scanner could look for. Also that when the Tarshik came, and she had never doubted they would be led to believe the outpost was vulnerable. And now the noose was tightening. Phase 2 is go, she whispered. A hidden switch flipped deep in the outpost's command core, and all across the facility, systems that had lain dormant shuddered to life. Outside, demolition teams prepping charges paused as the lights overhead shifted from sterile white to an ominous red. Bulkhead doors they'd forced open began to seal again, slamming shut with resonant clangs. Emergency sirens wailed a keening, defiant shriek that made even the most hardened Tarshik flinch. Thalek leaned over the holotable. What is happening? Grand Marshal, the sensor officer gasped. The outpost power output has quadrupled, energy readings off the scale. It appears they were channeling all output into standby capacitors, massive ones hidden under the infrastructure. As he spoke, the holofeed rippled with new icons, weapons turrets rising from hidden recesses, armored shutters sliding back to reveal the gleaming muzzles of coil guns. In a dozen places across the colony, exosuits that had stood dormant came alive. In unison, servos locked, sensors flared crimson, and the suits advanced on Tarshik squads with mechanical precision. On the tactical channel, panicked reports came in all at once. We're under fire. Automated units engaging multiple casualties. Sublevel collapse repeat. We are cut off. In the warehouse armory, one squad attempted to retreat, only to find the main corridor blocked by a meter-thick blast door. They fired at the enclosing walls, but high-density alloys shrugged off the plasma bolts. Then the exosuits raised their weapons in eerie synchronization and opened fire. Thalek felt a slow, cold horror seep into his bones. Redirect all firepower, he snapped. Reduce those sublevels to molten rock. The adjutant hesitated. Grand Marshal, if we deploy our plasma borers, it will risk destabilizing the entire colony structure. Do it, he hissed. But before the order could be relayed, every comm channel flooded with a burst of coded pulses. It took a heartbeat for the Dominion's algorithms to decrypt them. When they did, the message unfolded in stark, unsparing text across every Tarshik visor and holoscreen. We know how you think. We know what you see. Every scan you relied on was a story. We wrote for you. Welcome to the real outpost. In that moment, Thalek understood. The entire operation, every scan, every report, every confident projection had been a carefully orchestrated deception. The humans hadn't simply fortified. They had learned how to seed false readings so convincingly that an entire Dominion fleet had been drawn into a kill box. It was the first major twist, the hidden advantage he had never imagined such a crude species could possess. A technician's voice broke through the stunned silence. Grand Marshal, we have a situation in orbit. He turned, dreading what he would see. "Our upper sensor net has gone blind," she whispered. "Multiple unregistered signatures are emerging from the shadow side of the planet. Frigates, Terran pattern hulls. They must have been hidden in low-power orbit." On the screen, new contacts flickered into being, dozens of human warships rising from concealment. Not a ragtag fleet, but a coordinated formation. Weapons bays unfolding like the petals of some lethal flower. The realization settled over. Thalic like a funeral shroud. The humans hadn't been waiting to die. They'd been waiting for the Dominion to come closer. And now, as alarms screamed and the Outpost's hidden arsenal came alive, Grand Marshal Thalic finally understood the first undeniable truth. They had made a grave mistake. The moment the hidden Terran fleet rose from the darkness behind Vesper's reach, the last illusions of control began to splinter. Grand Marshal Thalic had waged 37 campaigns across the spiral arms, annihilating civilizations that resisted Dominion supremacy. Not once had an opponent revealed such precision, such cold patience. He searched for reassurance in the holodisplays, but all he found was the stark bloom of red markers as the Terran ships locked firing solutions. Inside the dreadnought, klaxons brayed. Sub-commanders barked contradictory orders, some screaming for full retreat, others insisting they push ground forces deeper to salvage the invasion. But the displays told a simpler story. The Tarshik were no longer advancing. They were fighting to survive. On the lunar surface, Tarshik squads scrambled to reorient. Armored formations fell back from the sublevels they had once been so eager to breach, only to find the exits sealed behind walls of reinforced alloy. Automated defense grids tracked them through corridors that moments before had seemed abandoned. In the wrecked command hub of Outpost Athena, Commander Rourke watched the Dominion formations dissolve into chaos. She felt no triumph, only the cold weight of inevitability. The humans hadn't built their strategy around holding territory. They'd built it around timing, around deception, around the knowledge that the Tarshek's cultural arrogance made them blind to anything that didn't fit their dogma. On the comms net, she addressed her people in a voice clear and quiet. "Phase 3, execute." Her words rippled across every hidden command node. Beneath the outpost, cavernous hangars roared open, and heavy crawler tanks trundled onto hidden rail platforms. Massive railguns telescoped up through armored housings that had once masqueraded as ore processors. Generators hidden behind false bulkheads began to glow with blue-white fusion light. High above, the first human frigates fired. Sleek coil gun. Rounds sliced across the void, moving faster than any eye could follow. A Tarshik destroyer took a direct hit amidships. For an instant, the vessel seemed to hold together, then the impact erupted outward in a lattice of ruptured hull plates. The ship's engines guttered, and it began to tumble, venting plasma and corpses. On the lunar surface, the Dominion's command uplinks faltered. Channels clogged with static and partial transmissions. Squads already fighting through a labyrinth of killing zones now realized their reinforcements were not coming. "Grand Marshal," the dreadnought's tactical officer rasped, "we must withdraw ground forces before the humans cut off all orbital support." Thalic's throat tightened. He knew it was the only rational move. But to retreat, to abandon a conquest already declared victorious, was an admission that the Dominion's supremacy was not absolute. "Signal all units," he said at last, his voice leaden. "Begin staggered fallback. Cover their extraction with plasma batteries. Any squad unable to disengage will hold position and inflict maximum casualties." Outside, the humans made that plan nearly impossible. In a sector the Tarshik had designated Beta 9, once a derelict storage yard, a wave of Terran exosuits surged from hidden ramps. Not drones, as the Tarshek had assumed, but piloted warframes linked by encrypted tactical AIs. They advanced in disciplined phalanxes, weapons blazing. One Tarshek squad fell back toward their landing craft, only to find the hatch fused shut by a shaped charge. As they regrouped, something shifted in the darkness behind a stack of supply crates. A whisper of motion too precise to be chance. A single Terran warframe stepped into view, its faceplate etched with a stylized eagle. Plasma bolts hammered its chestplate to no effect. The warframe raised one gauntlet and fired a micro-missile into the crate stack. The explosion lifted half the squad from their feet. Other Dominion soldiers tried to flank the warframe, only to discover a second group of humans rising behind them. Within seconds, the Tarshik had been encircled in their own landing zone. Across the outpost, the same story repeated itself. The aliens' fallback corridors became choke points. Their rally zones became kill boxes. Everywhere the Tarshik turned, humans were waiting silent, relentless, prepared. In orbit, the human fleet advanced in layered formations. Precision coil guns shredded the Dominion's forward screens. A squadron of smaller Terran corvettes broke off and dove toward the moon's surface, deploying dropships of their own. The dreadnought's hull shuddered as a coil gun round glanced off its armored prow. "Grand Marshal," the comms officer cried, "the humans are saturating our approach vectors. We'll lose orbital dominance in minutes." Thalic's hands clenched on the railing before him. He had once believed that humanity's reputation, ferocity, unpredictability, an almost pathological refusal to surrender was nothing but embellishment. Now, watching his war machine fracture onto single outpost, he realized those stories were far closer to the truth than he had ever feared. A fresh transmission interrupted his thoughts. The humans had broken into the Dominion tactical net. A woman's voice, clipped and calm, spoke over every channel. "Tarshik Dominion forces. You are trespassing on sovereign Terran territory. Your invasion has failed. Stand down or be eradicated." The channel cut. No threats, no boasting. Just the quiet promise of total destruction if they did not comply. The Dreadnought's bridge fell silent as all eyes turned to T.A.Lig. In that moment, despite every weapon at their disposal, he felt the first real stirrings of desperation. Because the humans were not merely fighting to survive. They were outmaneuvering the Dominion with an efficiency and discipline that no Tarshik strategist had ever accounted for. And as the outpost's hidden weapons burned the lunar plane red and the Terran fleet descended to claim victory, Thalic clung to the last scrap of denial, telling himself, perhaps, that even now they could still win, even as, deep down, he began to realize they could not. From orbit, the moon looked serene, its pale curve marred only by the flicker of gunfire. But inside the Dominion dreadnought, serenity had turned to ruin. The once gleaming bridge was a shambles of failed holodisplays, fractured tactical feeds, and panicked voices. Grand Marshal Thalic stood rigid at the holotable as new red markers multiplied across the projection. Human corvettes had punctured the Dominion blockade. Dropships fell in disciplined waves, trailing contrails like the strokes of a vast brush painting their doom. "Grand Marshal, we can't sustain this engagement," the tactical officer gasped. "Our ground forces are trapped. The flagship's shields are degrading if we lose containment on the primary plasma core." "Enough," Thalic snapped. But there was no conviction in it. The humans were relentless. It was as though the entire outpost had been designed for this moment. A monstrous shell concealing a mind that had counted down to the second they would strike. In Outpost Athena's command center, Commander Rourke's gloved hands moved over a series of recessed control panels. Her voice never rose, never wavered. "Execute Protocol Argus." Buried beneath the outpost, in vaults the Tarshik had never penetrated, massive armored racks began to unlock. Within them lay weapons older than most human colonies, remnants of the earliest planetary defense programs, built to repel far larger empires than the Dominion. Pneumatic actuators engaged with a thunderous clang. One by one, the vaults disgorged their cargo, tripod-mounted plasma projectors, ancient but refurbished to lethal precision. Alongside them were something far rarer: special circumstances operatives. They had waited in deep cryostasis through the entire siege, shielded from all scans. Now they woke, hearts shuddering to life as combat stims flooded their veins. Each wore the matte black armor of a ghost company that had, by all official accounts, ceased to exist a century ago. When the Dominion's perimeter sensors registered those life signs, the readings looked like a system error. When the operatives began moving, whole Tarshek formations realized, too late, that another phase of the human defense had begun. On the surface, a Dominion officer screamed for artillery support as the black-armored humans emerged from the dust. They were impossibly fast, vaulting barricades in a blur of kinetic blades and silenced Gauss rifles. The Tarshek tried to regroup. Plasma bolts raked the operatives, but they vanished into cover with preternatural coordination. A squad of Tarshek heavy infantry was cut down in seconds. Half fell without ever seeing who fired. One Dominion captain called for air support. But above, the Dreadnought's targeting systems were failing, blinded by coordinated jamming bursts from the Terran fleet. The flagship's main batteries swung uselessly across the lunar surface, unable to pinpoint any valid target. In the bridge's sallow light, Thalek stared into the hull projection as though it could explain this madness. "These are irregulars," he whispered. "They weren't on any intelligence dossier. They don't exist." But he knew, even as he said it, that was a lie he told himself to keep from shattering. The comms officer turned, her face pale. "Grand Marshal, incoming transmission." From the human fleet. Thalek's gaze snapped to her. "Put it through." A new Hala took shape. Commander Rourke herself, helmet removed so he could see the exhaustion and resolve etched into her features. "You have made a mistake you cannot reverse," she said evenly. "Withdraw, or this becomes the tomb of your entire fleet." It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. Thalek felt something slip inside him, a final thread of certainty, parting under the truth. But pride was a venom that could not be purged. He straightened, scales glinting in the ruined light. "We are the Dominion," he hissed. "We will not beg for mercy." Rourke's eyes did not waver. "Then you will be the Dominion remembered for losing a war you started." The Hala vanished. On the moon, the special circumstances operatives pressed their assault. Tarshek formations began to break, some soldiers casting aside their weapons as they fled into the burning wreckage of their own landers. And that was when the second twist struck, a revelation so profound it splintered any lingering Tarshek illusions of superiority. From the far side of the planet, a new formation of human ships emerged, vessels that were not warships but colossal haulers. Their cargo bays opened to space. Inside those bays waited a weapon of legend, a piece of human folklore dismissed by the Dominion's analysts as propaganda. Dreadnought class mining drills, each the length of a cruiser, each retrofitted with a fusion bore head and a reactor powerful enough to chew kilometers of rock. "Grand Marshal," the tactical officer rasped, voice failing. "They intend to breach our hull." The realization dawned in a single, bottomless instant. The humans had not merely prepared to defend the outpost. They had prepared to consume any ship that remained in orbit. This was not a defense. This was an execution. Thalek sank into his command throne, feeling for the first time in his long, triumphant career the taste of true fear. Because the humans had unleashed everything, they were indomitable, ingenious, and utterly unafraid of total war. And he understood finally what every species who underestimated them had learned too late. They had triggered a war they could never, ever win. Asterisk the last illusions of Tarshek dominance died in the silence between heartbeats. The Dominion Dreadnought's bridge was a mausoleum of failed commands, tactical overlays flickering, officers clutching consoles as if sheer desperation could alter physics itself. Outside the armor-glass viewport, the void boiled with the light of humanity's final advance. The human fleet no longer held position. It surged, Wedge-shaped corvettes and gunships accelerated in perfect unison, fusion drives flaring. Waves of kinetic projectiles slammed into the minion screens. A single-strike cruiser, the Resolute, dawn-pierced the perimeter and locked weapons onto the dreadnought's prow dot at that same instant. The mining haulers ignited their bore engines. Columns of blue-white fusion fire erupted from their massive drill heads. For a moment, the Dominion's flagship was silhouetted against the glare, an ancient reptilian leviathan, rendered small and fragile under the merciless clarity of human ingenuity. Grand Marshal Thala could do nothing but watch. "Bring the starboard plasma batteries to bear," he shouted, voice breaking. "Target the drilling ships." But the dreadnought's weapon systems were in chaos, disrupted by jamming, shorted by boarding saboteurs, locked out by system breaches. The haulers drew closer, ponderous as extinction, and then, with a sound no living creature had ever heard, metal screaming as reality bent, the first drill bit into the dreadnought's hull. It was not an explosion. It was a sundering. The hauler's reinforced fusion bore tore through armor that had never known defeat, venting atmosphere and liquid coolant in a billowing storm. Secondary reactors went critical, spewing plasma in luminous arcs. Inside, bulkheads warped and ruptured, fire consuming entire decks. Tarshik soldiers were flung across corridors as the dreadnought's spine buckled. Yet the humans were not finished. In orbit, the Resolute Dawn fired a salvo of kinetic lances, each impact striking precisely along the drill's cut. One by one, the dreadnought's power conduits ruptured, turning the vast ship into a furnace. Thalek's last order, to abandon ship, never left his throat. He simply stared, hands slack, as the Dominion's might unraveled. On the lunar surface, the collapse was absolute. The special circumstances operatives, black-armored revenants, advanced with pitiless discipline. Tarshik squads that attempted to rally were cut down by Gauss rifle fire. Others fled, only to be encircled by exosuit companies who emerged from hidden bunkers in flawless formations. A Dominion platoon tried to reach the extraction pad, where their shuttle still waited. As they sprinted across the scarred tarmac, a human heavy crawler rolled into view, its dorsal turret tracking them with baleful precision. A single burst of autocannon fire tore the Tarshik apart. Shredded banners fluttered in the thin atmosphere as the crawler advanced, guns already pivoting toward the next target. Inside the Outpost's command hub, Commander Rourke's eyes never left the tactical displays. She knew victory was no longer in question, only the speed with which it was sealed. She keyed the all-frequency channel, her voice calm as the tide. To all remaining Dominion forces, stand down and surrender your weapons. No further warnings will be issued. A Tarshek subcommander, pinned behind the shattered loader, listened in numb disbelief. The humans had orchestrated every instant of this campaign. Every feint, every hidden reserve, every horrifying contingency. He looked up into the artificial dawn, where the burning wreckage of the dreadnought traced a slow, final descent toward the lunar horizon. For a heartbeat, he almost pitied the Grand Marshal. Then the ship broke apart, a tidal wave of fire and alloy falling through the thin sky. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, Captain Varas regarded the spectacle with grim finality. The dreadnought was gone, its command structure vaporized. The Dominion fleet's formations dissolved as surviving ships scrambled to escape the inferno. All batteries, hold fire, Varas ordered. Let them flee. The lesson has been taught. Around him, crew members watched in solemn silence. They knew this moment would become legend. The day the Dominion learned that humanity's myth was no exaggeration. On the surface, Rourke watched the last Dominion dropships claw their way into orbit. Her voice came over the command channel. Confirm evacuation vectors. Identify any remaining hostiles. Secure all Tarshik prisoners. A dozen acknowledgments echoed back. In one ravaged hangar, A lone Dominion captain staggered from cover, dropping his rifle with trembling hands. A Terran exosuit loomed over him, its armored visor reflecting the fires that still raged in the distance. He waited for execution. Instead, the exosuit raised one gauntlet hand and pointed wordlessly to the ground. Surrender. With a shuddering breath, the captain sank to his knees, pressing his claws to the steel floor. It was over. All around the outpost, the same tableau played out. Proud invaders brought low, their banners trampled in lunar dust. Inside the command hub, Rourke finally exhaled. Her hands were steady as she reached for her sidearm and set it on the console, a gesture older than any war, the signal that the fight had ended. Above them, the human fleet held its silent vigil. In that quiet, something older than hatred settled across the battlefield. A truth that no Dominion propaganda could erase. When humans chose to fight, truly fight, there was no force in the galaxy that could stand against them. And as the last Dominion ships fled, trailing fire and shame, the legend of humanity's wrath was sealed for all time. The lunar horizon was still burning when the last Dominion ships vanished into the star-specked dark. In the outpost's shattered hangars, the crackle of dying fires and the whine of cooling metal replaced the thunder of war. The air smelled of scorched alloy and the dry tang of lunar dust, a scent that would haunt the survivors long after they returned to their worlds. Commander Rourke stood alone on the command deck, helmet tucked under one arm. She felt every bruise, every ragged hour of strain in her bones. Yet beneath the exhaustion was a quiet, terrible satisfaction. The Tarshik had believed humans were soft creatures of commerce and compromise, too addicted to their fragile alliances to defend themselves with conviction. But they would carry the truth home in their memory and in their scars. Humanity was not merely capable of war. Humanity thrived in it when pushed to the edge. Her comms officer approached, visor retracting to reveal soot-streaked cheeks and eyes wide with awe. Commander, all Dominion ground forces have surrendered. We're clearing their last pockets of resistance. Rourke inclined her head, her voice low. And the prisoners? Secure, confused, terrified. A humorless smile touched the young officer's face. They're asking if we're going to... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Rourke looked through the viewport to the wreckage, Field's Dominion banners smoldering in the regolith. No, she said at last. Let them return and tell the truth. That was the ultimate punishment. To crawl home with their defeat like a brand no propaganda could scrub away. She turned and keyed the fleet-wide channel, her voice carrying across ships and shattered planes alike. To all Terran forces, this is Commander Rourke. You have exceeded every expectation. You have vindicated every legend. Stand down to Condition Green. Prepare for recovery operations and prisoner transport. We are done here. A chorus of acknowledgments rose through static from the bridge. Of the Resolute Dawn to the exosuit standing sentinel over cowering Dominion squads. Humanity's wrath had come and gone, leaving only the silence that followed an earthquake. High above, the fleet's haulers drifted past the wreckage of the dreadnought they had drilled open like an egg. Their immense drills were cooling now, fusion bores falling still as the last embers spiraled out into vacuum. In the Dominion flagship's ruins, a single surviving log beacon powered up automated systems, attempting to transmit a final record. It sputtered across the void in desperate fragmented bursts. Dominion command, unprecedented resistance. Unknown. Special forces cannot hold. Greater than, those fragments would reach Tarshik High Command eventually. And when they did, the Dominion would have to face the unthinkable. They had not simply lost a campaign. They had awakened a predator they didn't truly understand. On the lunar surface, medics moved among the wounded. Some were human soldiers, bloodied in close combat. Others Tarshik warriors blinking in disbelief as they realized they were still alive. One Dominion sub-commander, stripped of his helmet, looked up as a human medic knelt beside him. He rasped a question in a halting growl. Why did you not kill us all? The medic's visor retracted to reveal a lined face and tired, kind eyes. Because we don't kill when the fight's done, she said softly. And because you're going to carry this story home. The sub-commander squeezed his eyes shut, as though he could blot out what he'd seen. But memory was a merciless warden. In time, his grandchildren would ask why the Dominion never invaded Earth again. And he would tell them about the outpost they thought would fall in hours, and the species that rose from it, like a storm. Far above, the Resolute Dawn maintained orbit. Captain Varas reviewed the last battle reports, then keyed a private channel to Rourke. You understand this changes everything, he said quietly. She nodded. It was always going to. But now it's undeniable. Their analysts will tear this apart for decades. They'll never understand, Rourke said, her voice as cold as the stars. They think we're primitive because we fight with everything, because we're willing to burn worlds to save them. Varas was silent a long moment. Did we go too far? He asked finally. Rourke closed her eyes. The dreadnought's death, the flaming sky, the terrified eyes of the Dominion's last survivors. They would all live in her dreams. No, she said at last. They crossed a line. We showed them the price. A hiss of static was her only reply. But no argument came. As the hours passed, recovery crews landed. Shuttles disgorged supplies, engineers, and humanitarian aid, because humanity was capable of mercy too. Capable of compassion. In the same breath, it dealt annihilation. When the last Dominion prisoner was loaded aboard a containment transport, Rourke stepped out onto the landing pad. She raised her eyes to the sky, now clean and cold again, and drew in a long, steady breath. It was over, for now, because this war would become legend. The day the Dominion learned what humans truly were, stubborn, fearless, and impossibly dangerous when cornered. And in time, other empires would whisper the same warnings. Never strike first against the Terrans. Never underestimate their resolve. Never forget the moon called Athena. Her final thoughts were simple. We are what we have always been, too wild to tame, too fierce to erase. And when she stepped onto the shuttle, she knew she had made humanity into a story that would never die.